right. Hey guys, good morning. I'm glad to see everybody here. Today we're going to do a one-part class because there's just so much involved in spring plant identification that it would take us months. Perhaps maybe this time next year, we could all get together and go out into the Marshall Gardens and we could start IDing some of these plants. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go over a brief overview of spring plant ID in this area. So basically, yes, spring plant identification, or wow, we have a lot of plants in Western North Carolina. We really, really do. So let's go to the second slide. There is a lot of plant diversity in the Southern Appalachians. That's one of the coolest things about this region. There are species here that probably haven't even been discovered yet. Okay, that's because this area is so old, geologically old. All right. Last year when we began the EcoRangers Club, I mentioned just how diverse this area is as far as plants go. And to review, we've got more than 100 native trees, 2,000 other flowering plants, and 500 moss and fern species. Those are all found in the Southern Appalachians, just in a small area. Nearly 60 kind of trees and shrubs may grow in diverse cove hardwood forests. And then we have spruce fir forests. Those occur at about 5,000 feet. Northern hardwood and pine oak forests occur at lower elevations, and hemlock forests occur mostly on the moist streamside habitats, okay? So spring starts off the season with a bang. And you can know that and just go outside and look and see how many things are blooming right now. And right now, I wouldn't be looking up at the trees, I'd be looking down at the ground, because that's where you're going to be seeing a lot of these plants we're going to be talking about. A hiker along the Appalachia Trail will see plenty of plant life right now. And like I said, more than 2,000 species of plants live within this mountain range. And then about 200 of them are specific to this region only. So that's pretty cool. So on these slides that you're going to see with these pictures, these plants can be found. They started coming up in March, and they'll end up not flowering and just being leaves by the end of May. So right now is peak season to see the flowers on most of these plants. So on this first slide, just to go in order, and I'm going to start on the left side on the top. That's called birdfoot violet. I know a lot of you have seen that in your yards. Mm-hmm. The next one is bloodroot, buttercup. I know you guys have seen those. And of course, what's that one all the way on the far left? Mm-hmm. You guys know what that one is, don't you? Anybody have a guess?
Dandelion.
Dandelions, exactly. Okay, then on the second row, starting over on the left, that first one is a dwarf iris. The one next to it is called false Solomon seal. And there's a reason for that. I think we go over some ID on Solomon seal earlier, but I'll tell you, false Solomon seal, you see that flower at the top? That's how false Solomon seal blooms. Solomon seal, which is not false, it'll come up like this, same leaves, but all the flowers will be underneath it. They hang like little teardrops, okay? The third one over is called golden ragwort. And the one all the way over at the end, those are so pretty and they're tiny, but they're beautiful. Those are called bluets. All right, let's go to the next slide. These are more that are blooming. Top one, does anybody know what that one is? That pink one there on the left-hand side.
Nobody likes it.
Nobody? It's beautiful. That's a columbine. Those grow really well around here in the shade. Right next to it, if you look at the shape of that flower, what do those look like? They look like upside down pants, don't they? Those are called Dutchman's breeches. And breeches is another word, breeches, pants, okay? The one right next to that is called dog hobble. You'll find that growing near streams. The one next to that is fire pink. Go down to the second row. That first one, that purple one, is called self-heal or heal all. The one in the middle, everybody has this in your yard all over the place. It's called chickweed. Mm-hmm. You can eat chickweed. You can put it in salad. I would put, when it starts coming up in March, I'd use the young ones. Right now that it's getting a little too old, it might get kind of bitter. The one next to it is Indian paintbrush. And the one next to that is a mayapple. All right. Let's go down to the fourth slide. We still have more. And guys, I just cut out some of the easier ones to spot. There are millions right now. Okay, that first one right up there in the top left corner, that's called a mountain laurel. That's a shrub. You'll see those around here. They're beautiful. Carolina rhododendron. Everybody's seen those rhododendrons. These are all shrubs on the top. The next one is a dogwood. That's a tree. Everybody knows dogwood. That next one, that orange one, it blooms in very high peaks. Does anybody know what that's called? That is called a flame azalea.
I was going to guess azalea.
Yeah, and you'll see them up in the higher peaks, and they're blooming right now, and those are just gorgeous too. Next to it, Carolina phlox. Those usually people will plant them on walls or they'll grow over stones.
Out there.
We have some right up from the library. Go down to the next row, and there's your true Solomon seal. Remember the false one I said had the bloom at the end? You can see where the blooms are coming up underneath those leaves.
So there's the false one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the true one.
There's the true one. Next to that, everybody knows what that's called. Does anybody give me a guess on that one? That real frilly looking one right next to the Solomon seal? You'll see it on the roadsides a lot. That's called Queen Anne's lace. Mm-hmm. It also has a name of Indian carrot because you can actually eat the root. And right now, guys, don't go out and eat anything, okay? Let's just nix that right now. We don't want you eating plants, so please don't, okay? Right next to that is a plant called New Jersey tea. Native Americans would make tea out of that, and you can. Next to that, does anybody know what that three petaled flower is? Those are blooming all over the place right now in the woods. That's called a large flowered trillium, and you'll see those all over as well. And then right next to that is another beautiful tree called a Carolina silver bell, and the bark on that tree is kind of silvery colored. It's beautiful. All right, so that's just a few of the plants that are blooming right now. So let's go to slide number 5. How can you possibly ID all of these plants? What do you do? Okay, you need a good field guide. Some of these I do know, and I know well because I've ID'd them over and over and over again, but a lot of them, I'll go out in the woods and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I have a field guide. Another little shortcut is you can get an app on your phone. If you install it, and you'll hold your phone to the plant, take a picture of it, and the app will try to tell you what it is. I like using the field guides because when you're up in the woods, out hiking on the trail, sometimes you can't get a signal. So if you have the field guide with you, you've got it right there. So the best place to start is with a good book that covers plants in our region. Well, what region are we in? We're in the Western North Carolina, Southern Appalachians. So that's what you want to look for, is a book that gives you those specific plants in that specific area. Remember when we had our first meeting and Ms. Caroline and I went out, we took that field guide with us. But for the trees, Plant ID works the same way. Get a field guide and there'll be a key in the front of the book, and the key will take you step by step. All right, but we can review on that. The key, you're going to be using the shapes of the leaves, the flowers, what the stems look like, if they're fuzzy, if they're smooth, all of that helps you ID those plants. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Let me get to the next slide. All right, so these are the field guides that I recommend. That first one, I've used all 3 of these books. The first one, the Wildflowers and Plant Communities of the Southern Appalachian Mountains and the Piedmont, that's the one I always take when I go hiking. It's got an easy key to use. The pictures are very vivid. And what I really like about it is it separates, if the plant's flowering, it'll have it in sections by red flowers, yellow flowers, blue flowers. And that just makes it so easy to go, oh, wait, it's got a blue flower. Let's look in there. The next 2, Botany in a Day, that's a great book. It has sketches and it helps you ID patterns and certain types of characteristics that plants would have. And then the next one, Forest Plants of the Southeast and Their Wildlife Uses, that's always a good book to take out as well. So I would suggest one of the 3, but the first one I highly recommend. That's a great book to use. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. All right, so Basic plant characteristics. So if you look at these, the first illustration there of the entire plant, you've got a flower bud and a flower. You've got the stem leaf, which is the leaf that's going to be coming off of the stem. Okay, that axillary bud, there'll be a little bud at the bottom of the leaf. You can sometimes ID with those. Basal leaves are the leaves closer to the ground. So stem leaf is going to be up here. The basal leaves will be closer to the bottom. And of course, you've got the roots. Hopefully you can ID it without pulling it out. Then if you look at the next section, this goes into even more depth with the flower itself. You've got the petals, the stigma, which is the one big piece that comes up in the middle, and then you have all the anthers next to it. The anthers are what the bees are in there looking for right now. You know, when you see those bees flitting around in your flowers and they come out and their legs are all covered with pollen, that's where they're getting it from, okay? And then you also have going deep into the flower, but you're really not going to get that deep into those when you're IDing, unless you want to. You can definitely take a knife with you out on the trail, cut them open and dissect them. It's pretty interesting to look at. Okay. The easiest place to start is with, like I said, the color of the flower, the shape of the stem, and then go for the placement of the leaves and the shape of the leaves. Most of these guides will start with one of these items in the key. Okay, so let's say you found a plant with a white flower. The best place to go is find the section, like I said, that has white flowers in it. That's the best place to start. After that, you'd answer questions within the key. So what shape is the stem? Is it round? Is it square? How are the leaves arranged? Are they opposite? Are they whorled? All of that will help you ID these plants. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and just to review, remember, if anybody saw the tree ID meeting way long ago, these leaf shapes are the same leaf shapes we used for the tree ID, okay? So if you've been practicing your tree ID, you're gonna be pretty good at your plant ID. This just basically goes over the tips at the top, and you can see each one of them has a different shape. So when you pick up the leaf, look at the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf. Those are the tips. If it matches any one of those in your key, you'll want to go forward. The margins, those are the sides of the leaves. Those also have specific shapes, as you can see there. The leaf bases have shapes. That first one called cordate. Cordate is related to the heart. If you look at that leaf, it's heart-shaped. Okay, so look at the bases of all those. Then the total leaf shape itself, you'll have a whole list down there at the bottom. If you get familiar with these leaf shapes, the bases, the tops, the whole bit, IDing plants becomes a lot easier. But if you get a field guide, you don't have to memorize any of that, because we have a lot we have to remember every day anyways, right? Mm-hmm. That's why people put out field guides. It makes it a lot easier. Definitely the shape of the leaf will help you to identify the plant. And the stem will too. So let's move on to an example. All right, I'm going to help here with a picture. Okay, stems can help you out. Stems are really, I like to look at the flower and then the stem, because those two will help me to begin with, and then I'll start to pick apart with the leaves. Okay, so this is a picture of horehound on the left, which we do have growing here, and self-heal. We looked at that before. Okay, both of these grow in abundance all throughout the Southern Appalachians. They're both members of the mint family. Okay, mint is so easy to identify. Mint stems are square, most. I don't ever want to say all, because sometimes someone will find something that is a mint and it doesn't have a square stem. But if you have any mint in your yard, just regular mint you're growing, pick it up, pull a piece off, and feel the stem. It's square. It's completely square. So these two plants, if I'm wandering along and I see this plant, I'm like, what is this? If I pick it up and feel it has a square stem, I immediately know it's some type of mint. Okay? When you run your fingers across it, you can feel a very square, boxy shape. Mints also have opposite occurring leaves. Does anybody know what that means? Give a guess. There's no wrong answers, and I love it when you guys guess.
Is it they're across from each other?
They're across from each other. Exactly. Look at that picture of the horehound and look at the picture of the self-heal. You'll see here's the stem and the leaves are like that. Okay. They're totally opposite each other. Okay. Most mint plants have them opposite. So if I find something with a square stem that has opposite leaves, I believe I've got a mint. That's how easy it is. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Whoops. Now, I always lecture everybody on this one. This should be the first plant that you learn to identify. Does anybody know what that is? Miss Shauna, don't say anything. It's got 3 leaves. No one? All right, guys, I want you to look at that one. Oh, wait a minute. We may have an answer. Can you say that again?
Poison
Ivy. Exactly. Exactly, guys. This is poison ivy. Now, the nasty thing about poison ivy, and believe me, I'm really allergic to poison ivy. If I look at it, I will get it. If it blows on me, I'll get it. And it usually lasts for about a month. I'm good with poison ivy. Poison ivy leaves, yes, they always come in 3s. However, their edges may vary. If you look at that picture, some of the edges are nice and smooth, and some of them have little serrations on them, which is very tricky. This is a little bugger of a plant.
Yeah.
It wants you to touch it, okay? Please always try to ID poison ivy first. A lot of places where you go to ID flowers, they may be growing in shaded areas, under things, and if you start digging in there, you might find some of this, and you don't want to find any of that, trust me. Just another note on poison ivy. They vine, so they will grow up on trees. If you see a vine about this big around and it's all fuzzy or any kind of fuzziness on a vine, poison ivy, don't touch it. They start on the ground. You can also catch poison ivy in the winter when the plants are dormant because their stems have so much of that urshol, and that's what it's called, urshol oil in them. In the wintertime, if you brush against it, you can still get it. So if anybody's allergic to it, stay away from this plant and learn how to ID it, okay? So poison ivy, we said it's got serrated edges, smooth edges, but always remember, leaves of 3, let it be. And anything with 3 leaves, I usually just stay away from just to be sure. Exactly. Poison ivy does turn red in the fall, but hopefully you'll have it, picked out before then. Some plants also have a scent. I didn't mention that with the mint, but mint usually, if you pull a leaf off the mint and just kind of, it'll smell minty. Sassafras smells like Fruit Loops. Spice bush also, for some reason, everything smells like Fruit Loops to me. Smells like Fruit Loops. But yeah, a lot of plants have really good scents, so that's a cool thing to do too. If you're sure it's not poison ivy or something you're going to be allergic to, pick it up, crush up a leaf, and smell it, and you may get some kind of interesting scent off that. Okay, Miss Shauna, if you go to the next one. All right, guys. These are all the books that we have in the card. Well, they aren't all the books. These are just a few of the books we have in the Cardinal system on plant ID. If you want to get out and start IDing some of those plants, it's a lot of fun. And you don't have to go out specifically, I'm going to go ID plants today. Just go for a walk and take a book with you. And if you happen to see a really pretty flower or something you don't know what it is, that's when you go down and ID it. And what really would count is if you ID'd it and wrote it in your nature journal. Even drawing a sketch of it, because that helps me sometimes to remember what it looks like too. If I do a quick sketch, you can do a quick sketch out in the field, and then when you come back home, you can get colored pencils and color it in. So that adds some really pretty brilliance to your nature journals. All right, guys, so I said this was going to be short and sweet because there's just so much to go over with these plants. Basically, what I'm recommending is get a plant ID book and go out and start going for walks, because a lot of these are going to disappear by the end of May. You won't see the flowers. You'll just see the leaves. And it's much easier to ID them with the flowers. Don't forget to go onto the iNaturalist site log in all of your entries, because remember, guys, you're the scientists that are putting that site together. You are the guys that's going to put together the Museum of Natural History for Madison County with all of your pictures and your IDs. And that's really important. All right, so next time we meet, it's going to be a two-part series, and we are going to talk about Western North Carolina fish. Believe it or not, there's a lot of them here too. So hope you'll show up next week. Get out there and start IDing some plants. If you happen to come by the library and I'm here, bring your nature journal and I'd love to take a look at it and see what you're doing. Okay. All right, guys, until then, have fun outside. It looks like a great day. I'd go out there today if I were you. See you later. Bye.